Hello, I want to go over in this video how to make your report now that you have your data, okay, and that you've have hopefully completed your calculations. So let me pull up the spring rubber band data, okay. Now, first of all, I realized that in the video my title is wrong, so that was a bad start. If I want to fix the title in my graph for my spring one stretching, it's not force versus time, it's force versus stretch. We do most things versus time, but if I double click on the title, I can then come over here and edit the title. It should be force versus stretch. All right, and that's a much better title. Okay, so I'm going to clean that up. All right, and then let me just hide my image here. Get rid of that. I made a copy of Spring 1, but this is now the returning data, okay? So this should be, I should be consistent in the way I title things. So this graph should be Spring 1 returning. So let me double click on the title. So that should be Spring 1 returning, and then it should be force versus stretch, just like the other one. Okay, so be consistent. So my titles are now taken care of. I changed this, I duplicated this. Oh, so the tab down here, when I duplicated it, I didn't mean to, I should get rid of the words copy of, because now this is the data for Spring 1 returning. Okay, so I need to take all of this data and get it into a report. Okay, so one thing that I need to do now is open in Google Drive. So I need to go to my Google Drive and I need to do a new sheet. Okay, so, or Google Doc. We're going to write in a Google Doc. So we already have a Google Sheet. All right. So I'm going to have things on here. I didn't say on this, but I should have a name of the lab. Okay, so this is Spring Rubber Band, Spring dash Rubber Band Lab. Okay, I'm going to put my name, Kurt Owen, partners, Newton, Einstein, and Leibniz. All right, so I had a good set of partners there. All right, and now what I want to do is get into the analysis, okay? So for Spring 1, okay, so I'm gonna have all of my Spring 1 data. Okay, so I want to put in a grid where I can insert some images. All right, so I'm going to put in a table that is 2 by 2. You can see it's blocked in here now, and we're going to fill that in with our charts and images. I may have to, I don't know if I can fit them all into this size. I may want this to be bigger. We'll see. Okay. So right now my view size on this screen, it's at 100%. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so that you can see it better. Right. Now, in order to put this information from the spreadsheet, I have the spreadsheet tab up here at the top of the page, so I can go back and forth between my Google Doc and this. I'm going to call, by the way, I'm going to put a title on my Google Doc. So let me change that. Oh, Spring Rubber Band Lab. That's a good title. And I'm going to call this my sample. Okay, you don't put the word sample in there. Yours going to be Spring Rubber Band Lab. So there's my sample, Spring Rubber Band Lab. I can go back and forth between what I'm writing and the spreadsheet. Okay. So I could, for the returning data, I could highlight all of this. Whoops, I'm sorry, I went to stretching data first. I can highlight all of this and I could copy it and go back over to the lab and I can paste it. Okay, and you can see it put all of that in there. It made it quite large though. So it's a little bit tough to work with this. So I'm going to undo that and I'm going to show you another option in order to get the data in there in a better way. I can use my snipping tool. Okay, so this is my snipping tool here with the little scissors on it. You have a snipping tool as well. If you want to find your snipping tool, you can search and type in snipping tool. And this is the, so snipping tool. Looks like there's a snip and sketch tool as well. Okay. You can pick that out. Okay. So I have loaded that up and it's on my little toolbar because I use it all of the time. So you can find it by typing in the snipping tool. All right. So if I take the snipping tool and say, let me go to the rubber band data. Let me unhighlight this. So let me just double click down here and control copy down here. Okay. And I can take my snipping tool and pick that I want to snip something new. And I can snip this data right here. Okay. And then I can go back over to my, let's minimize that. And that puts it on the clipboard. Okay. So now if I paste what was on the clipboard, you can see all of the data shows up. So here's my data table, right? So that was for the spring stretching. And the nice thing is I can resize that. So I can make it bigger or smaller as I wish. Okay. So I can stretch it out or make it smaller so that it fills up that square nicely. And then in the next square, I want to put the graph that goes with that. So let's just take the snipping tool again. And let's do a new snip. And this time, I want to copy the graph. Okay, so here I go back over, minimize the snip. And I want to go back to my report. And there's the graph. Okay. Then I'm going to do the, for the same thing here, okay, I'm going to have the rubber band on the compression or when it's returning. Okay, so I'll go back over to my spreadsheet and go to the second tab where it was returning. And I'll get my snipping tool again, do a new snip. And snip this data. Make sure you get the total work in there. That's an important number. And go back to the minimize the snipping tool, go back to the report, paste. Then you wanted to get that final graph in there, okay? So here we go. I need to get the final graph. So I will go back over to the report. I am on the spring one returning, so I can use my snipping tool again. Pick a new snip. Whoops, I didn't need to control copy that. I shouldn't have, in fact. Hopefully that won't mess me up. I need to minimize the snip, go to the report, and paste. Okay, so now I have all of the data right here. I have the data, okay, and I have the graphs, and now I'm ready to write about those. So underneath of here, I can come down here, and I'm ready to begin writing. Okay, so here I can start saying this here. This is the data for spring 1. Okay. And then we can start talking about it. Okay, so important things to notice would be whether it is in fact linear data. You can see it's highly linear data. Okay, so if I look at the R value, probably need to make this a little bit bigger so I can see it here. Okay, we can see for the first one, they actually use an R squared value, which would just be R times R. So we can see that those are very close to 1. Okay, but we should comment on that. Okay, the data for both the stretching and returning is very linear as predicted by Hooke's law. Okay, the let's say R squared values. Okay, the R, let's say if I want to put a superscript in here, I need a bigger band, I think. Oops, no, I need that back again. The R, how do I do subscript, superscript, the R, oh, how do I do that in this? I'm used to Excel. I'm okay with you saying the R squared value like this. Can't find the superscript, subscript command. The R squared value is 0.99 for stretching and 0.995 for returning. So both are very close to an exact fit. Okay, remember an exact fit would be exactly 1. Okay, so those R squared values show that we have a very close linear fit. Okay, so this supports that our spring behaved ideally, or maybe say behaved like an ideal spring. Okay. We can also see, oh, let's look at the slopes. Okay, we have 16.7 and 17. So it looks like the slope in both cases was approximately the same, right? The slope in both cases were close, with a slope of 17. That would be Newtons, capital M, Newtons per meter during stretching, and 16.7 Newtons per meter when returning. These slope values should, let's say slope values represent the spring constant, which ideally would be the same in both cases. Okay, now the final thing I want to talk about is the work done. Okay, so if you look at the total work, when stretching, okay, gravity did 1.718 joules of positive work, meaning the spring did negative 1.718 joules of work, and gravity did negative 1.739 on the return trip, while the spring did positive 1.739. Okay, so the amount of work, done by the spring. I should probably say the negative, we'll just talk about the work done by gravity. The negative work, how do I say this? We'll say the work done by gravity. In fact, we'll say the total work. Total work done by gravity while stretching the spring was 1.718 joules, while the spring returned 1.739 joules of work on the return. Okay. Now mine was negative because I reordered my mass from high to low. If you didn't, that number at the bottom of the table would be positive. Okay. But gravity was doing positive work while the weight was going down, and the spring was doing positive work on the return. But we can see that they're approximately the same. Although the spring appeared to return an additional, I'm going to put in blank percent of energy. Okay, now that it talks about how to find that percent difference in the lab report. Okay, so you would take the difference of those two absolute values and then put it over the amount of work done on the trip on the way down in order to make that into a percentage. So I'll leave that to you to figure out what that percentage of difference would be. Okay, this seems to verify that energy was conserved in this process. Okay. And that's a good amount to write probably about those little charts. Okay, so that's just sort of a little sample paragraph that you could write about these. You should write it in your own words. But the main thing I wanted to show you was how to insert the images into a little mini table. So you probably want to get a hold of that snipping tool to make it easy. And since these are all saved as images, you can always resize them, move them in and out. Okay, and later on I may teach you how to actually insert these images within the text. Okay, so if you right click on an image, all right, you can actually have it get moved around within the text of the document if you want it to. All right, so that's enough for now. That will get you started, and you should be able to write the report and get all of your images from the spreadsheet over into your document. Okay, so enjoy writing your report.